Sign up for the free WagerTalk text club to gain access to free plays and exclusive discounts. Just text WagerTalk to 33222 to sign up and get a $10 coupon to use on WagerTalk.com.
Welcome into Best Damn College Football Show, part of the College Football Today segment. I am Drew Martin, joined by Ralph Michaels and Robbie Veno. We're breaking down 3 championship games, going around the horn. Welcome them in. Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. Ralph, welcome to championship weekend, buddy, and welcome into the show.
Hey, thanks. Even though, this is a college football show, I do want to mention I'm putting my 18-4 record on the line tonight. My NBA very selective. If you are watching this live, I did post my 23rd NBA play of the season. And again, so far this year, 18-4.
18-4, that's not bad. Cashing some tickets in the association. He's Ralph Michaels. We also got Robbie Veno at Rob Veno Sports on Twitter. Rob's always cashing some tickets, at least in one of the sports, college football being one of them. Robbie, welcome in, buddy.
Good afternoon, Drew. Good afternoon, Ralph. Glad to be here. Championship week. A lot of really good matchups for us. We're going to get into 3 of them, but boy, it looks like an interesting week of college football before we hit the bowl season.
It absolutely does. Rivalry weekend behind us. Championship weekend upon us, guys. We're starting off here Friday night light style. Note that, guys. Friday night here. Conference USA championship game. Western Kentucky at UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio here. The Roadrunners, they're catching, -3 points here? That's what we're seeing. Western Kentucky is the favorite now. Not sure if I got that wrong, Ralph, but 72.5 being the total right now in, of course, the Alamo Dome. So we'll have controlled climate here. Western Kentucky throwing around. UTSA only 1 loss in the season, that being their last game to North Texas. A little bit surprising by most accounts, considering they were, 9-point favorites, 10-point favorites. What are you seeing here, Ralph? What are you liking in the Alamo Dome Friday night, Western Kentucky, UTSA?
Well, I do have some concern UTSA lost that game, not only because of the loss to North Texas to keep an undefeated season. They have failed to cover 3 straight. They were 8-1 ATS their first 9 games, and back-to-back failures to cash a ticket. Western Kentucky, on the flip side, as hot as it gets down the stretch. Remember, they lost to this UTSA team 52-46, and that was 4 straight losses. Western Kentucky was 1-4 to start the year. They beat UT Martin, lose to Army, lose to Indiana, lose to Michigan State, lose to UTSA, and then turn it around. One of the best passing attacks in college football with Zappi, for 52-9 ratio now. Split in the running game. Again, they are a pass-happy team that throws the ball. They're completing 69%. Well, can UTSA slow them down? Well, they hold foes to 58%, but that number is a bit misleading because of the competition they played. Looking back at the first game, Western Kentucky was 38 of 60 for 523 yards passing, 670 yards overall. I do have one system I want to bring up. And to me, it makes sense when a team is on the road and their opponent's given up 35 points or more their last game, and the team has won by 28 points or more in back-to-back games. Those teams have covered 64% of the spread. So Western Kentucky is off a 35-point win against FAU. Western Kentucky is off a 32-point win against against Marshall, and UTSA allowed over 35 points in their last game as they allowed North Texas 456 yards. Those teams with Western Kentucky, 64% in that play. I'm going to lean that way, and even though the total's crazy high, Western Kentucky is one of the fastest-paced teams. I think they can score early. If they do that, UTSA will have to speed up their pace. I lean with the over as well.
Okay. And Robbie, coming to you next, UTSA went on the road to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where Western Kentucky is located, and won 52-46 earlier in the season. That was on October 9th. However, coming into this game, UTSA has dropped 3 straight against the spread, whereas Western Kentucky, man, they've been on a roll, cashing 5 straight ATS. The market kind of like in Western Kentucky here in the last day or two. How do you feel about the Conference USA Championship game, Robbie?
Well, I've liked Western Kentucky all season long and dating back to preseason, and they've done a really good job, certainly with this air raid offense. Let me go back. Ralph did a really good job laying the groundwork here, but let me go back to that earlier meeting between these two and just point out a couple of key sequences that probably stopped Western Kentucky from winning that game. Right before halftime, UTSA is down 24-21. And Western Kentucky's on the march, or excuse me, they're on the march. They're looking to go ahead 28-24, minute left in the game. They get picked off by Western Kentucky on the 26th. Western Kentucky's returning the football. They fumble as they're returning. UTSA gets it back and pushes a touchdown in right before halftime to take a 28-24 lead. They extend that thing all the way out to 42-31, guys, and it looked like they were about to, have enough cushion between they and Western Kentucky. But in the end, right at the end of this game, Western Kentucky closes it to 52-46, and then they go right down the field, first and goal, 5-yard line, with about a minute left again, under a minute left. They get a 15-yard penalty on a pass completion to the 1-yard line, backs them all the way up to the 22 plays later. They get picked inside the 5, and the game's over. And they're basically a couple of sequences away from winning that game right there against Texas San Antonio. So Ralph asked the question, could UTSA do anything to slow down Western Kentucky's pass game? And I don't know that they can. That being said, Western Kentucky hasn't shown the ability to slow UTSA down at all. UTSA put up 1,200 total yards between the two in that first game. Obviously, they both did well. Maybe Western Kentucky's run defense is a better fit against the UTSA run offense. Maybe that's one slight difference you could find. Drew, you mentioned perfect conditions here. If you're playing Western Kentucky, you really don't want perfect conditions. AstroTurf or field turf, excuse me. The heat is no wind to speak of, perfect temperature. The game last week to North Texas, and I know UTSA closed the season 0-3 against the spread. The game last week against North Texas, I think, is debatable, right? I think many people saw it coming. I was in that bunch where UTSA clinches the West Division title the week before against UAB, and they do it on the final play of the game, and then they have to go on the road to end the season against a team in North Texas that's really come on the second half of the year. So is that loss excusable because UTSA was still reliving last week, or is it a sign that they're really staggering down the stretch? I don't know. You got to make up your own mind there. I think I'm with Ralph, though. I lean Western Kentucky. I think this offense is just too high-powered. Nobody stopped it all season long. Even with home field here, I don't know that that's enough to help UTSA. And again, you got two teams, guys, that really haven't been in this particular situation before. A lot of upperclassmen on both sides. I think WKU has shown they can handle the road. They played some Big Ten teams, too, and did pretty well. So I'm going to lean Western Kentucky, despite the fact that, UTSA is 3-0 as an underdog this year. All three are on the road, but they are 3-0 as an underdog.
Good points there, Robbie. Good stuff for Friday Night Lights Action Conference USA. And now we'll head to Saturday's card here, the Southeastern Conference Championship in Atlanta, Georgia. Mercedes-Benz Stadium here, Rob Veno. We're seeing Georgia, who opened up minus 4-point favorites, but because of last week's game here, Georgia smashing Georgia Tech, Alabama having to go to overtime against Auburn. We're now seeing it shoot up, about minus 6.5, pretty much across the board now. This is Georgia, Alabama in Atlanta. Total of 53 has been bought down as well, Robbie, down to minus 49.5 or 49.5 for the total. So first time in over 150 games, Alabama won't be the favorite. What are you liking here, Georgia and Alabama, Saturday, 4 o'clock Eastern time?
Yeah, I think, power ratings made the game Georgia -7.5. So it crosses that 7 mark, at least where my numbers are concerned. And that's probably product, Drew, from what you just pointed out. Alabama, last couple of weeks, not impressive in victory against Arkansas. They've come from behind against Auburn last week, 24 seconds left, touchdown just to force OT. If I take 3 common opponents between these two, Florida, Arkansas, and Auburn, Georgia goes 3-0 with 3 blowouts against those teams, 3-0 against the spread. Alabama goes 0-3 against the number. Big favorites in all 3. I don't want to say life and death in all 3, but all 3 are really close. I mean, Florida and Auburn, you may call life and death. The Arkansas game, 42-35, certainly they got all they could handle. So big disparity there. Georgia 3-0 against the spread. Alabama 0-3 against the spread against those 3 pretty good SEC teams. If you dig into the statistics, you can make a case for Alabama. Alabama last week, actually, I don't think Auburn gained 200 total yards. So maybe you could say Alabama, played really, really well, just messed up a little bit. But it seems to be a common theme here in those 3 games. Alabama over 600 yards against Arkansas, but still only win by 7 points. So something about Alabama this year where they're not getting the margin that we're used to. Meanwhile, Georgia's finding an easy way to get margin. One of the biggest keys you want to watch for in this game, in my mind, going to be Bryce Young and that Alabama offensive line against the Georgia pass rush. Alabama, number 108 in the nation this year, allowing 35 sacks. What's worse for them about this number is that 29 of those 35 are against SEC teams, where, there's only 6 allowed against Mercer, New Mexico State, Southern Miss. So against the good teams in the SEC, they haven't protected Bryce Young real well this year. And Georgia's number 4 in the nation in quarterback sacks. Their defense has gotten 41. So you got one of the elite pass rushes against a team that's not so good at protecting their quarterback. That's not a good matchup. Other side of the coin, Georgia's only allowed 8 sacks. Alabama is number 3 in the nation with 43 sacks. So maybe those two neutralize each other. Stetson Bennett, ability to run and get out and scramble may help avoid some sacks as well. Running game, out of this Brian Robinson Jr. injury for Alabama, their lead tailback is concerning, to say the least, for Alabama. While Georgia can be 3-headed at running back, plus their quarterback, Alabama doesn't have that luxury. According to Nick Saban, it's a pulled muscle, lower body injury. We'll see. Alabama's rushing attack hasn't been great this season, 150 per game. Georgia actually averages 52 more than that. I think the running game could be in favor of Georgia here. And if I get to the pass defense really quick here, guys, Georgia's pass defense has just been incredible. Again, Ralph talked a little bit about UTSA's pass defense numbers being somewhat skewed. You can make that case for Georgia. Their numbers are terrific overall. However, they haven't faced but 2 of the top 55 pass offenses in the nation. Alabama's faced 5 of those. Of course, they play in the same division with Ole Miss, with Mississippi State. So that goes without saying. But the disparity between the two in pass defense may go deeper than that. The good thing about this matchup is, and where it's great, is that while Georgia's pass defense is so good, that receiving core for Alabama is outstanding. And vice versa, Alabama's, average pass secondary faces a bunch of freshmen and sophomores in the top 4 for Georgia. In fact, their tight end leads the team in receptions. One key note, they did work George Pickens back into the lineup last week. That could be huge here. He only had 1 catch for 5 yards. But George Pickens could be a real big deal in this game. I just happen to think it's Georgia's year. I think the defense is overwhelming no matter what the competition has been. I think it'll stand tall in this game as well, Jordan Davis and company. So I think I'm going to lean Georgia minus the points.
Georgia minus the points. Ralph, coming to you next. We just kind of teed it up in terms of Alabama hasn't been an underdog of this size in quite some time here, Ralph. But Rob talked about the matchup of their offensive line versus the Georgia defensive line. If you're betting Alabama, that's something that's got to somewhat worry you here, Ralph. However, the ultimate equalizer being near a touchdown for Georgia. That might point to Alabama. Nick Saban catching near a touchdown. What's going on here in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Ralph?
Well, I mean, the better team's favored, but I'm concerned about the Alabama O-line, and if I wasn't, I'd probably be betting Alabama. But you allowed 4 sacks to LSU, 2 to New Mexico State, for God's sakes, 4 to Arkansas, and 7 to Auburn. So yeah, your O-line has not done anything down the stretch. You've rushed for 0.2 yards against LSU, 3.1 against Arkansas, and 1.9 against Auburn. Now, with those numbers, is it going to get me to the Georgia side? And it's simply not. I trust Nick Saban in this situation getting points. It doesn't matter how bad they looked at Auburn. They still had a 229-yard edge. They needed a miracle. They're living on borrowed time. Some say Georgia, even if they lose this game, they're going to be in the playoffs, and they likely are. So, I don't think a coach or players ever would bring that up. But clearly, you don't have to do everything to win the game. You can be very conservative and just call it close to the vest and not make any stupid mistakes and lose this game. Now, granted, winning the SEC is a huge deal for Smart, so that's not going to happen. But in the back of the mind, I think it can sway some choices late in a game. But I'm going to leave you with just one stat. Rob pretty much covered everything, about this game that I can mention. Georgia gets all the credit in the world for being the best defense in college football. They've held 7 opponents to a season low. So when we look at the end of the year, 7 of their foes had the lowest amount of yards they gained when they played the Georgia Bulldogs. Are you guys surprised that I'm going to tell you Alabama has held 6 opponents to a season low? That, to me, is the mark of the defense. Not that they're giving up 292 yards to 230. They played much better offenses than Georgia. You've held Miami of Florida, Southern Miss, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn all to a season low. Give me the under. It would have been a late phone play for me had I jumped in when the number was where it was at 53.5. I still like the under here.
I'm with you, Ralph. Yeah, points at a premium here. And to Ralph's point, guys, 5 of the last 6 opponents they faced, the Tide have held them to their season low in terms of offensive production. So, maybe not getting enough credit there on the Alabama side of things. Maybe look towards the dog plus the points as well. Guys, we got one game left. Want to break down and talk about handicapping here, Ralph. This might be the best of the bunch. 55.5 the total here. Houston, Cincinnati. We're seeing Cincinnati minus 10-point home favorites. This game in Cincinnati at their home field there. Minus 10.5 at other shops. Houston on an 11-game winning streak here, Ralph. They're only lost the first game of the season to Texas Tech. Cincinnati obviously running the table, winning all of their games. A big one in the AAC. What do you like in Saturday, 4 o'clock Eastern, Ralph?
Well, let's see. Each team gets, by the way, $40 million if you make the playoffs. So if you divide it amongst your AAC opponents, each team gets a piece of that. So if Houston wins this game, they're going to cost themselves about $3 million. That isn't going to go into their coffer. If they lose the game and Cincinnati goes to the playoffs, they get a share of that. So obviously pressure. I mean, it's become historic. Be the first team in out of 4 teams as a group of 5 team. That puts all the pressure in the world. That clearly keeps me off the Cincinnati side. That and that alone will do that. When I look up the matchup, Ritter against Toon, Ritter to me doesn't get enough love. I mean, he struggled in the first quarter of a couple games, and it's really bothered me. But then he's had good finishes, so don't know what to make of it. With Clayton Toon, you have a 26-8 ratio, and I'm not going to put too much in Cincinnati's run down the stretch. Their offense has been dynamite. 506 yards, 544 yards, 444 yards, 45 points, 48 points, 35 points. But listen, guys, they played USF, they played SMU, they played East Carolina. Those are teams that were going to get run over late in the year, and Cincinnati just did that. Houston's defense, to me, is the difference maker. They're allowing 289 yards, only 15.8 first downs per game. That's 3.5 better than Cincinnati. I'm gonna pass on the game. Like I said, I believe Cincinnati is the better team. I made the line 12, but that pressure will clearly take me off the game. I do like the under here. And one thing I do want to be careful of when people talk about Houston and, oh, look what they did on the road. They're undefeated. They've played 5 road teams. Guess what? Tulsa's 500. The other 4 road teams that Houston played have a record of 10-38. So, yes, they gave you good defensive numbers, but when you're playing teams that have a 0.25 win percentage at home with a 10-38 record, that's not the kind of teams you could stick there. I think their defense is good enough. I think they slow it down. If Cincy has the lead, absolutely. Ford will get the ball every time. Ritter will keep the ball. He's had 93 rushes. It'll be a conservative ground plan just to win the game. Under for me.
Under in the AAC championship for Ralph Michaels. Rob, coming to you next. Plus 10. It can be a lot for this Houston Cougars team on an 11-game win streak, but Ralph mentioned a couple points there. Cincinnati is a dominant team. And one thing worrying me about betting Houston is that SMU game, Cincinnati really poured it on. I almost feel like this has the same feel, although I do think Houston's better than SMU. What are you liking on Saturday, Robbie?
Yeah, I think a lot of the key points that Ralph made, I would have made myself. I do believe that there's an advantage to Desmond Ritter over Clayton Tune. I mean, just simply put, the dual threat ability is much better with Desmond Ritter than it is with Clayton Tune. So I think that's one thing. I think playing in Nippert Stadium probably helps. This is not a neutral site conference championship game. It's a home field edge. Maybe that's all I can give Cincinnati, though, guys. I guess you have to give them their win over Notre Dame, too. When you take a look at both of the schedules, and Ralph pointed out SMU's miserable road opposition, but I don't think, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head, I don't think either one of these teams has played any more than 3 teams that'll go to a bowl game this year. So that schedule is just loaded with garbage on both sides. The SMU game we can use as common opponent. They both beat SMU up pretty well. Houston, obviously, it took a last-second kickoff return for a touchdown to win that game, right? SMU had just tied it on a 50-plus yard field goal. Kickoff with 30 seconds left. Houston runs it back and wins the game. Total yardage in that game was all Houston, though, 489 to 355. And when I think back to that game, I hadn't seen the explosion out of the Houston passing attack that we had seen in recent years. In that game, we saw it. They hit the gas against SMU. But then in watching SMU ensuing weeks, you find out that the defense was never that good. Everybody stepped on them. Cincinnati outgains SMU 544 to 199. 199 yards allowed to SMU by Cincinnati. So again, I think we're making a lot of the same points. Both teams with dominant defenses against their level, against the competition that they played. I'm going to take what Ralph said one step further, just because the trend indicates it. I think under in the first half at 27.5 is the right way to go. I think there's going to be a feeling out process. Luke Fickell is not, generally speaking, a guy that's going to come out of his shell from the opening kickoff, where Dana Holgerson might be. We'll see what they try and do, but I don't like Houston's running game having any effect here. It's going to have to all be tuned in the passing game. That keeps me away from Houston here, because if they get behind and Cincinnati can pin their ears back and rush, I don't like the sight of that for Houston. But the reason why I say first half under is Cincinnati's just played to that all season long. 12 games this year, 10 of the 12 stayed under in the first half. Here we're looking at 4 touchdowns to beat you. I just don't know that these two teams, the weather's going to be decent, right? For Ohio in early December, I think I saw 45, 47 degrees at kickoff time, not much in the way of wind. But I think you'll get good defensive effort. I think you'll probably get a little feeling out process to start the game, and therefore I think under 27.5 the right way to go, first half.
Ralph, I have a follow-up question for you because of what Robbie just said in terms of schedule-wise. And the AAC is down. I mean, UCF was banged up. South Florida's down this year. Tulane was down as well. Cincinnati played Notre Dame. I mean, yeah, they played MAC team in Miami of Ohio, who's decent. But really, outside of SMU, Not a whole lot of quality opponents here for either team. Do you find it a little bit kind of tricky of a handicap in that because you don't have a lot of information and kind of competitive matchups to go off of?
Yeah, I do. And, it's because when you're playing, when you're a 20-point favorite, when I'm adjusting my power ratings, I really don't adjust much. If you're a 20-point favorite, if you win by 24, you win by 50, it doesn't change my thought process because a lot of times, if you're an aggressive coach, you can run up the score and make your stats look better. We know Fickle's not that. We know Fickle is conservative. So, Cincinnati, against SMU, they maybe wanted some style points and they ran it up, and Murray State, they scored. But those weren't run-ups. Murray State, they had 391 yards. They just happened to score 42 points because Murray State couldn't stop them on big plays. Temple, they scored 52 points, but it wasn't if they went to a hurry-up offense and were throwing the ball late. Temple was just a horrific defense early in the year. They ran their offense normally, and they ran that. So, yes, because Houston did score some games and their numbers look a little better because they extended margins. I don't think Cincinnati did that early in the year at all. Maybe later when he got close to being in the top four of the playoffs, he did. But when you're a favorite that big, to me, I sort of throw those games out. Yes, you won. You did your job and covered. But if you win by 20 or win by 50, to me, there's no difference in those type of stats. It's like throwing out garbage yards, going back just to tell, a North Coast or a Phil Steele story, we would actually make adjustments to the box score that, if you lost a couple players, your quarterback got hurt and you had no yards in the second half because of a quarterback injury, we make adjustments in the box scores. And that's what you sort of have to do when you're handicapping these types of games, is look at when teams were competitive. And Rob talked about first half situations. And, I look at both of those teams in the first half modes when I broke them down.
Yeah, good stuff, Ralph. Guys, follow him on Twitter at CalSportsLV, WagerTalk.com. He talked about the NBA run. Only 4 losses so far this season. What is it, Ralph? 18-4, did you say?
18-4, yep. Hopefully 19-4 after tonight.
Yeah, guys, if you're watching live, thanks for joining us. Please smash that like button. Feel free to drop a line below on YouTube. These 3 games, any college football games, let us know where you agree with us, where you disagree. It's all welcome here on the YouTube channel and the replies below. Robbie, get you back in here, man. Kind of final thoughts for the show, and if you have a most confident play, best bet for the show, throw it out there, buddy.
Yeah, final thoughts. It's going to be a really good week here, Drew. I mean, there's teams sitting in the 5, 6, and 7 positions in that college football playoff poll that, just based on what happens here, could find themselves involved when push comes to shove. Most notably, Oklahoma State, if they can get past Baylor. If you see Alabama lose, they're probably out. Oklahoma State might slide in. Notre Dame still has a chance to slide in. And you wonder how much effect all these coaching changes are going to have. I'm going to go to best bet, and I'll just reiterate what I said about Cincinnati, Houston under in the first half. But, one concern could be Luke Fickell. Obviously, if the first name that comes to my mind as soon as I see Brian Kelly taking the LSU job is Luke Fickell to Notre Dame, obviously everybody else across the nation that's closer to those situations than I am is going to see that. And I just wonder if these coach, he was linked to USC in the beginning. It hasn't gotten to Cincinnati yet, but I'm going to go back to where Ralph was headed when you were talking with him, Drew. They had trouble before those final 2 games of the year. The final 2 games of the year, they separated SMU and East Carolina, and they won by margin. But those Tulane and Tulsa games were nip and tuck the entire way. They barely beat Tulsa. And that 31-12 against Tulane is not indicative of what a struggle that was against a backup quarterback for Tulane. So I'm going to play for best bet Cincinnati, Houston under first half, 27.5, noting that Cincinnati has only allowed 6.3 points per game in the first half so far this year, less than a touchdown. I think they can handle Houston in that regard. We'll hope for not a lot of turnovers or, stuff that sets up easy scores here. But I think under 27.5, first half is a real good play in that game.
I like it. Thanks, Rob. And Ralph, coming to you for final thoughts. Best bet for the show, buddy.
Final thoughts are this. Oklahoma State plays at noon Eastern. The Cincinnati game's at 4 o'clock Eastern. The Michigan game's at 8 p.m. Eastern. If Oklahoma State has an early lead, they're a live betting situation because they will absolutely try to get style points. Now, the opposite would have been true. If Oklahoma State would have played after Cincinnati and Cincinnati won, I would think you might see some deflation on that team. So keep an eye on that's the one situation that pops out on a game we're not talking about, that if Oklahoma State, something happens where Oklahoma State starts pulling away and they have the chance to steamroll Baylor, I think they will. I'm going to go under in the SEC game. Like I said, Bama's defense does not get enough credit. What they've done down the stretch has impressed the hell out of me. Georgia has not faced a defense like this. Bama has not faced a defense like this. So give me the under.
Looking towards the under in that one. Okay, Ralph. And yeah, guys, for my final thoughts for the show here, mine is, this playoffs selection show this upcoming weekend. This is going to be a good one. I don't remember many years like this where so many options can happen. Coming into this weekend, there was always, kind of, if this team wins, then this team will go. Outside of Georgia, guys, I feel like the other three spots, anything could kind of happen this season. So that's going to be fun to watch, to really see what happens and, kind of put them out there, the committee. You're going to have to make some tough decisions here, make some fan bases pretty upset. So that will be a fun one to watch for that selection show. For my best bet for the show, what's going to look towards that SEC game, but actually I'll go to the Houston-Cincinnati game. I'm going to go on the Houston Cougars here, guys, plus the points. 10.5 if you shop around. 10s are out there, but 10.5 is out there. It's circa in Las Vegas, multiple offshores as well. I think this Houston Cougars team winning 11 straight games. Could you imagine if they would have won that week one game? I mean, what if? You can play what ifs all day. But if they did beat Texas Tech in week one, this would be a lot different point spread. So I think I'm going to take that extra little bit of value, quote unquote value, with the Houston Cougars plus 10.5. But you heard it there from Robbie Veno, Ralph Michaels. Great analysis on these college football games. Guys, we will be back for bowl season. We got analysis coming up for you. So best of luck with your bets. Until next time, have fun watching the games. And for Ralph, Rob, I am Drew. Thanks for tuning in.
Are you tired of games of the year and 100-unit locks? If so, check out the professional handicappers at WagerTalk.com today. We leave all that nonsense for the other guys. And for a limited time, new users get their first daily picks purchase up to $40 for only $1. $1? Whose idea was that? Johnny Detroit? I guess so. To redeem this special, just go to WagerTalk.com, choose a handicapper and their picks package using coupon code TRYWagerTalk when checking out.